Welcome guys, this is your instructor Rahul Shetty. In this video, we're gonna see the basics of API testing. So we will start from scratch to understand what is API, and then I will give you some real-time examples of APIs. So that way you will understand what are they, why do we require them, and how do actually API looks like, right? So once you understand the basic theory of API, I will go over the core concepts of API like get, post, put, delete. There are some HTTP CRUD operations which are frequently used in API testing. We will go over all these, and more importantly I will also explain what are parameters and what are different parameters present for API and what are headers, cookies and their scope. So with this you will get a theory knowledge on core concepts of API testing, right? So once you get a theory knowledge, then I will introduce a tool called Postman to show how to test the APIs. So here we will understand the APIs and their operations. Once you understand them, then we will start testing those APIs using the Postman tool. And for that, I will take one real life example, Google Maps API, to demonstrate this API testing process using Postman tool. Okay, so we will go over all the Google API like add place APIs and show you how it works. All right, let's get started. So let's start with the first basic definition of an API. So instead of knowing what is an API, first we should try to understand where do we require this API in the project architecture. What is API is a simple definition. API stands for Application Programming Interface. But did you understand anything from that? No. So you have to practically understand where exactly this comes into picture in end-to-end project architecture. I will try to explain those and then I will come back to read the API definition again so that you will have clear understanding of what exactly API is. Okay. So I will tell you one problem now. Let's discuss this scenario, and from these scenarios we will try to understand what are the design issues and what are the problems, and then in the next lecture let's understand how come API addresses these problems. Okay, first let me take one website, for example Marriott Hotels. So these are the hotels which provide reservation services and they have their room servicing hotels in everywhere across the world. So they have prepared their front end website which looks like this, where you can come here and select your city and then you can see if there are any rooms available and you can book it. Okay, so that's the front end, and let's assume that this whole website is prepared long ago, at least 10 years ago, and they have used Java as a language to design this front end like Java, HTML, CSS. Okay, next coming to backend. So in every project there will be client and server. Client is nothing but what you see on the screen. Okay, so all the UI front end we call it as a client, and server is nothing but what it gets stores from your client. Now let's say when you book a reservation from this website, then all your details, reservation number, at what time you are booked, everything will be stored in the server side, which we also say as a backend. They do have some databases or some backend code which process your details and generate reservation number. Okay, so let's assume that the backend code is also developed in Java. So create reservation is one method. Just a scenario, assume that there is one method in the backend code, so that will actually responsible to confirm whether the rooms are available and it should create reservation. Okay, once the reservation is created, that ID is sent to database and it gets stores here, so that tomorrow when you want to retrieve your existing reservation, you can use this database to get it back to your client. Okay, but ultimately this method will take all the check-in date and check-out date and the passenger name, and it will check if there is an availability in that particular city, and then it creates the reservation and pass the ID. So that's the overall concept, and this is how this Marriott website works. Now, you all know that not only that specific website, there are different other marketplaces where they can sell hotel rooms like hotels.com, booking.com, and makemytrip.com. There are different websites which also does the same. Basically, these guys collect all the hotel information across the world and they display in their website. So in that website also, they are showing this Marriott hotel, what we originally saw. This is their official website, but you can also book this hotel from hotels.com or any other website. Now, problem is front end is now client is nothing but hotels.com. So this is a client, right? And now hotels.com reached Marriott guys. They want to showcase their hotel in this hotels.com website. But how come you can form the integration is the question. So let's say now you have to book a hotel in Alabama state and you will give check-in and check-out and you say check availability. So hotels.com do not have any information about this hotel, right? Marriott. So they have to contact Marriott backend and see in their database if there are any rooms left on that specific date. So once it returns those details, again it has hotels.com should retrieve from backend and it should display for the client here that 2 rooms left or 3 rooms left. But how can hotels.com website can talk to Marriott? Marriott hotel will not expose their code, right? So let's see here, create reservation is a method which is actually doing us all the work. But in this case, it's possible because front end and back end both belongs to Marriott. So they have written one project where each and every file talk to other file and get the data. This is fine because it's their whole code and all these code is sitting in one repository. Okay. But hotels.com is entire another repository. And why do Marriott Hotel exposes their complete code? Okay, that's very bad thing, right? Just because those guys market our rooms, that doesn't mean that we will hand over complete our repository code. Okay, in that case, how do these guys get the information from Marriott, or when someone books the reservation here, how they will pass that information here? Okay, so when you book any hotel here, directly hotels.com will not confirm you. All the details, whatever you want here, should be sent to the Marriott backend code, and that Marriott backend will validate all the stuff, whether availability and all, and then it create reservation and stores the ID and give it back to the hotels.com. But how this website can talk to this code? That is our problem, because both are different repositories maintained by different companies. And like hotels.com, there are hundreds of websites which also does the same, like makemytrip, yatra.com or booking.com, hotels.com. So will Marriott give their repository to each and every guy whoever asks? That's not the ideal thing, right? Then how it is happening in our day-to-day life? I think you are slowly understanding why API is required. Okay, this is our problem. I'm just telling you the problem now. Unnoticingly, something will strike in your mind that we need something to fix this, which is nothing but API. So let me give you another problem before we see and bring the API into the picture. All right. So Marriott only, both front end and back end, same repository. When they developed 10 years ago, they used Java and JSL language to build all the front end. But recently, there are many front end frameworks like Angular, React, Vue.js. So they want to update their web page with the latest frameworks available, which is, let's say, Angular. So you all know that Angular uses TypeScript. Okay, it will not use Java. So these guys have written TypeScript code and developed front end. And again, there is a problem. Backend is written in Java. Okay, so we are very sure that no other tool can beat in backend code other than Java. In front end, you have so many languages, but backend, the best and evergreen is Java. But when you write code in TypeScript, And can you call this create reservation method which is written in Java into TypeScript? It's not possible, right? Not only Java and TypeScript. You cannot call a method which is present in Python language into your Java. Technically, it's not possible. So earlier, our life is easy because everything is on Java. But because of the market competition, they want to develop a top-notch websites with good look and feel. So they have adopted Angular TypeScript. The one solution is that they have to write entire backend now in TypeScript, which is really hectic and not at all suggestible because TypeScript is very popular in front end but not at all in back end. Okay, this is very common in recent days. I think each and every website now what you see in your real life, front end which is client will have one stack like Angular, TypeScript. In the back end when you go, you will have another stack like Java. These are the design problems which will industry face when you don't have an API. But still you don't know how API solve this problem. You understood that there is a problem, and obviously as this course is on API testing, you will be knowing that API is going to solve this problem. But how? So in the next lecture, let's see how come API play a major role in solving all these design problems, and from there we will see the definition. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. So now let's see the solution to fix this problem when you have different stack in both front end and back end. Right. So now we were bringing a feature called API, which actually acts as an interface between your client and the server. We also call it as a middle tier layer between your client and server. So how does this help us? So basically, you know that create reservation is one method somewhere present in their backend code, which will actually check the availability and create reservation and stores it in database. There could be 100 lines of code inside it, it doesn't matter. So what we will do is that we create one API. So that API will call this create reservation method whenever somebody hits this API. So this API we will host in the same server of Marriott.com. So if somebody try to access this API, then this API will come and call this create reservation method. Okay, that's the baseline. So now what is exactly difference of calling? Why can't we call directly? So this API is independent of any language. Now let me go back to Marriott.com. So you will give the destination, dates and your name, and you will book your ticket. So from front end, when you pass the destination, dates and the room what you want, these are the details you basically need to reserve the room, right? All these details when you click on reserve button at the end, once you complete the flow, and finally you will click on the reserve button, right? Basically front end will capture all these values, destination, rooms, dates, everything, and front end captures this data and send it to the API. So whenever it is sending to API, it sends the information over HTTP protocol. HTTP protocol is independent of any language. Okay, so either you use Java, JavaScript or TypeScript, no matter what language you use, all the information from front end, it will send to the API using HTTP request. Okay, once this API gets the details, all the details it will send to create reservation. Because create reservation here requires first name, check-in date, checkout date, area where they need to book, and the number of rooms or something like that. It needs those details to run this method and create reservation. So if you go back to our first screen, initially both are in Java, so directly this front end is interacting and calling this create reservation with these values. Whenever user enters in the client side, all the details are successfully captured by this front end, and those details were sent as an input to create reservation method. Based upon these details, inside processing will occur. Finally, reservation will get created. As now it is in TypeScript, what we are doing is that we were sending all the information to API, and that information is going on HTTP protocol. And moreover, when you send information, you are sending it in one format. That format could be either JSON or XML. Okay, so XML here is again independent of any language, right? Both JSON or XML does not belongs to any specific language family. They were like used by every language. Now JavaScript have libraries to parse the JSON or XML. Java have the libraries. Python have the libraries. So these are like representation. Okay, these are not languages, right? These are representation of data in specific format. So however, all the details like first name, last name, you will send on JSON over HTTP protocol to API, and this API now give those details to create reservation. So developer have to create this API in such a way that when someone hits this API, automatically this API should capture that information and send it to the create reservation method. So that's the API duty. So developer will create the API in such a way that it does that work. How to create API is not our scope. Okay, this course is only on testing. So you don't worry about it. You just need to ask developer that do we have any API to create reservation. Okay, and then it will send back the response to API if it is success. And the same response the API receives it and then uses XML or JSON to send back that response to front end. So front end tools like Angular or JavaScript will parse that JSON. As I told you, JSON can be parsed by every language. Once they get response back like reservation number, confirmation yes or no, they will send it back in a response of JSON, and TypeScript will parse that JSON and extract the values, and it will show on a front end HTML to the user that your reservation is confirmed and this is the reservation number. So in that way, there is no interaction with Angular and Java here. What all this create reservation is required, everything we were getting as from an API. And what all we need to send it to create reservation, everything we are sending it to API. So this API acts as a middle layer or an interface between client and server and serve both the technologies. And tomorrow, let me show you another screen. There is one more problem that hotels.com, right? Now, hotels.com want to showcase Marriott hotels in their website. Initially, we thought it's not even possible to share all the backend code. So now this Marriott hotel guy can expose their API because this API do not have anything, right? There is no code inside it. What all it does is whenever it receives request, that information it will pass to create reservation. That's it. But so both are hosted in the servers, right? Once somebody hit this server, that information will be sent to the create reservation server, and backend will be happen in Marriott server only. And the ID will be sent it back to API, and API will give back to the hotels.com. So there is no interaction between hotels.com and Marriott Hotel directly now. So even hotels.com do not need any code now. They just need to confirm reservation. So these guys should expose an API like this. If they expose an API, then these hotels.com will access that API and it sends all the information like first name, last name, check-in date, checkout, and then does the same thing just like how we have done in this scenario. Nothing different. It's all about exposing an API. Okay, so this is how we gonna solve our problem. And if I go back to now Wikipedia definition of what is API, it is an interface. Full form is an application programming interface. It's an interface or communication protocol between client and server intended to simplify the building of client-side software. That's what we saw now, right? Basically, it's acting as an interface or communication protocol between our client and the server to simplify the building. So to simplify the design process. Okay, earlier now, if there is no API like this, for TypeScript and Java, it's tight to integrate. So they have to change the whole architecture. So for all this simplification, without complicating the things, this API is playing a key role between client and server as a communication protocol and solving our problem. So that's the overall concept of what is API and where do we require API in real time. Okay, so let's continue in our next lecture. Thank you. Okay, so when I say API, there are different ways to create these APIs. There are some set of standards we need to follow to create this API. Which developer does that? So the most common APIs where everyone uses are REST APIs. REST possesses some rules and regulations in creating an API, so that everyone needs to follow those criteria to fall under REST umbrella. Similarly, there are APIs called SOAP APIs. We also say them as SOAP web services. Services or API, these terms can be interchangeable. There is a slight difference, but in general people call APIs or services as the same name. Okay, and SOAP services uses a different standard in defining that SOAP services. Most of the legacy services are relied on SOAP because the REST is the one recently into market a few years ago, but SOAP services are in existence from ages. The problem here is that SOAP have so many conditions, so many restrictions, and that provides tight authorization, authentication as well to communicate with API. Even REST does same, but REST we call it as a lightweight protocol. And now majority of web applications are moving to REST APIs only because of its lightweight and flexible way of coding. Okay, and this course is entirely focused on REST APIs. Any latest website which is being developed are being on REST APIs only. The legacy services which are in existence from years are still on SOAP services, but all the latest technologies like Facebook, Google, Instagram, every other website uses REST APIs only because it's easy to build and maintain. Okay, that's the main reason. And REST API testing is very, very necessary because now for hotels.com guy, he needs to know whether he is getting the actual result from Marriott API or not. Okay, so that's not possible to talk to create reservation method because that is external third party code, right? What all he can do is test the Marriott API to see if he is getting the proper response. Whenever Marriott Hotel is sending back, if something is wrong in this API, then obviously that wrong details will be sent back to the customer after he booked the ticket. And if someone is not thoroughly testing this API, and that's it. And they might get random number or they may not see the reservation correctly, and there will be so many problems. Okay, there are people who can test this back-end technology in Marriott company, and there are people who test this front-end part to see if everything in the UI is working fine. But if you don't test this integration part of how you are getting the data, then you might end up with so much of major bugs in your application. So that's the reason these days testing an API is becoming the hottest requirement. APIs are just on a lighter weight. You just need to hit an endpoint and you will get the response. Within a second, you will be able to tell if Marriott APIs are working as expected or not. Okay, and before we start with one example, we need to understand some terminologies as part of this REST APIs. Okay, so as I said, REST is one of the architectural design to create APIs. These are some of the rules which you have to follow. Step 1 is endpoint. What is endpoint? Or we can also say it as a base URL. So this is the place where your API is hosted. And now if you want to hit this API, you actually need to hit that endpoint. So endpoint is that area where your API will lie. your API will sit it there, and someone asks you to hit that API, which is nothing but hit that endpoint, hit that base URI where exactly that server is located. So if you want to test any API, first requirement what you need to have is an endpoint. That means where exactly that API is located, so that you can call that API by hitting that endpoint from your API testing tools. Step 1. Don't worry again, as I told, when I start doing one example, I will clearly explain what is the endpoint, where to give it, how to hit it, how to get the response. Everything you will learn in detail. I'm just giving you a high level overview before we start. And next, we all know that information is being sent to API on HTTP protocol, right? There are different methods which HTTP exposes when you are communicating with these REST APIs from your client. So one of the methods is get method, post, put and delete. These are the 4 commonly used methods to communicate with the REST APIs. So here, when you talk to API, you can talk with get HTTP method, or post, or delete, or put. So let's try to understand on high level each and every HTTP method now, so that in our next lecture, when we start taking real-time examples, we will do some examples on all these HTTP methods. Right, get method. So this method will be used whenever you want to retrieve some information from your server. Now, let's say you want to retrieve existing reservation. For that also, Marriott guy have to come up with one API which will give the reservation details when hotels.com passes reservation ID. So basically from front end, in existing reservation, if you go back to your existing reservation, you will give that your ID, right? And you will click on retrieve. So that ID is being sent to get reservation API, which Marriott should expose. Okay. That API it captures, and then it will send to appropriate method, and that method will be responsible to get all the details from database for that specific reservation ID, and it will send back to your API, and API again will send it back to your front end in JSON with all the details. Once front end receives that JSON with all the details, they will read the details and display on the screen. That is how when you try to retrieve any reservation, process happens in the backend. So here get HTTP method should be used to call an API when you want to retrieve something from their server. If that is your requirement, then this Marriott guy has to develop API in such a way that that API will accept only get HTTP method. So that's the rule. You might think that why can't I use post? You can use it. There are 4 different methods given by REST API. But as I said, when you are using REST architecture, you need to follow some specific rules. So it's not for us. Developer has to prepare like this. I'm just showing that. Okay. Why I am teaching you is because tomorrow when I am explaining you to hit this API by using get method, you should not confuse that why should I use only get, because the developer will create that API by accepting get method only when you want to extract from information from their server. So that's what I clearly given here. Okay. Before I come to this how to send data, let me talk about post. Now when to use post? Post request is used to send data to server. Now if you are booking new reservation, that means you are giving new details of the customer and his itinerary, and it should create something reservation ID, right? So basically we are creating something on our server with our details and the reservation. So when you create something on the server, then when you pass the details, the API should be like post. Okay, that's the rule to have as a post HTTP method. So when you want to create reservation, then the API what they expose should be post. And when you want to get reservation, then you can use get. Next, put. Put will replace the existing resources which are already present on the server. Basically, you have created one reservation using Post API. Done. Thereafter, you have to update your reservation by changing last name or phone number, whatever. So in that case, this API Marriott guys has to provide one more API to hotels.com, and that API should be like update reservation. Okay, but when they create that API, the goal of that API is to update some information present in their server, right? In that case, this has to be accepted by only put HTTP method. Okay, so that when you call this API method while doing API testing, you will clearly say that I am going to use put HTTP to send my information. Where to give all this I will explain. There is a tool what we start with a Postman. In the Postman I will clearly explain how to give HTTP methods like get, post, put, and the final one is delete. We also say them as Crud operations. When I say Crud operations, C for create, post, R for retrieve, get, U for update, put, D for delete. So we often call them as a Crud operations on your API. Alright, so these basics are enough for us to start with our actual API testing in our next lecture. I am going to show one tool called Postman, which will help us to do this API testing. And there we will see all these operations again, endpoint. So basically to test API, what all details we need, we will discuss first, and then we will hit our API and then start from there. Alright, thank you. So one final lecture before we wrap up all the theoretical discussion on this REST APIs. So from very next lecture we will dig into the real-time examples, and I promise thereafter no theoretical, everything practical will be done from next lecture, because you need to understand some theory before you start seeing how to test APIs. So that's the only intention, and this is the last lecture. Let us try to understand few more concepts here. First, what are resources? So resources basically represent an API or a collection, which can be accessed from the server. Now for example, google.com is the server. That is the place where all your APIs are stored. Now this is the base URL. In the last lecture we learned what is base URL, right? That is the place where your APIs are hosted, right? Now in Google there are different APIs. There are Google Maps, Google Search, Google Images, and Google Docs. So there are different sections, right? And for each section there will be an API. Now once you reach that server, to which API you have to redirect. So that information will be given by resource. So in this URL, this is the resource. Okay, so this maps resource will help you to tie up to the maps API. So whenever developer design an API, he will create a resource name to that API. Okay, so that resource name we will include in our base URL, so that when we are sending the request, we will pass that resource name so that Google knows to which API it has to direct the request what it received to its server. So every API test you do should have with a resource and base URL. These are mandatory. Okay, without these details you cannot send any request to API server. Okay, so in these examples, maps is a resource, search is a resource, and images is the resource. Alright, next, when you send a request, we just realized that we need to send these details as mandatory, right? There are few more details which are optional and depends upon how that API is designed. If that API is expecting parameters, you should also send parameters as part of your request. So there are two types of parameters we have when calling API server. One is path parameter and another one is query parameter. So let's try to understand difference between these two. Path parameters are a variable parts which keep on change for every API request. They are typically used to point specific resource within a collection. So that means it's like a sub resource. Images is a collection where we are hitting the endpoint. In that images, you are interested to retrieve the image with this ID. Okay, when you upload an image in Google, obviously for every image it will have some unique ID so that you can recognize that, right? So that's nothing but path parameter to point to specific resource within collection. Now in Amazon you might make some 100 orders. So amazon.com/orders. Orders is a resource here. Okay, so there is an API which have a collection of all orders. So when you call that API, you are asking that I need only the response with 112 order. So this is a parameter. So you are sending a sub resource as well, so that Amazon response will be drilled down to that specific order and you get a response. Okay, so that's a path parameter. And similarly, in the same fashion, we would send another parameter when you are sending an API request, that is a query parameter. Query parameters is used to sort or filter the resources. Amazon.com, this is the base URL and this is the resource, right? Now, I want to sort the orders based upon this date so that it will give me the details only on orders placed on this date. Unlike path parameter, we are not finding any sub resource here. Okay, in path parameters, from orders you are drilling down to another sub resource. But whereas in query parameters, when we use them, it's like filtering or sorting or drilling down into the existing resource only. We are not rerouting to any sub resource here. Okay, so that's the difference. And how to differentiate between path and query? Okay, when you send, if it is a query parameter, you should have a question mark before writing the parameter name, and this is parameter value. If it is path parameter, it would be just like URL only. You will just add one more slash after resource and you will pass the path parameter. Let me show one simple example where query parameters are used. Let me go and search New York in Google search. So let's see what happens. Now copy the URL what got generated when you search with New York, and I have pasted the same here as well, right? So this is the URL. Let me copy it again. So here, this is an base URL. So that means we are hitting the Google server. In their server, resource what we are accessing is search. So that's why you see that /search. This is the resource name. And next you have parameters here. And if you carefully observe, it starts with question mark. So when it starts with question mark, then that kind of parameters are called query parameters. As I told you that query parameters are always identified with question mark. If there is a slash, then they are path parameters. So basically in their search API, we are drilling down the results. That means we are filtering the results with New York search keyword. Okay, similarly there are other query parameters as well. So each and every query parameter is separated by ampersandile. But when you start query parameter for the first time, you should always give question mark, right? So this is how your request is being created and sent to server, so that now API understands that these are query parameters and this is resource name and this is base URL. Based upon that, it will redirect your request to the correct API and gives you back the response based upon the parameters what you send. Okay, so here we sent New York related parameters. So this is the response. Okay, once we get the response from API, then front-end developers will read that response and generated HTML page for us like this. Okay, so what you are seeing is now front-end code, but all this front-end data is generated from the response what this API gave us. Okay, so this is how we will test and see the response. Alright, this is the best example to understand the difference between query parameters and path parameters. When you are doing real-time examples from very next lecture, you will again understand in what scenario we have to use path parameters and what scenario we have to use query parameters, and everything will be detailedly explained from scratch. You need not worry. Alright, so overall, when the endpoint is constructed and when you are calling an API with a URL, this is how it looks. One is a base URL, that is the server name where your request should go to, and this is a resource to point out that specific API, because Google may have hundreds of servers, right? So which resource you need, okay, which API you need, that decides based upon /resource what you pass. And then these are optional, like if that API demands to have some query parameters to understand the request, then you can send query or you can send path. This depends upon API contract, how that got designed, okay, but these are like mandatory. Alright, so this is how you ultimately build endpoint. So from our next lecture, when we design endpoint, we will fill all these details and hit the API server to get the response. Okay, I'll show that very soon. Now, one last topic, what are headers and cookies? So these are also might play a key role based upon how API is designed. These are like metadata, additional data which API needs to understand. Okay, in layman terms, it's simple that we were sending additional details to API to process our request. Okay, so you want to hit and get the details from one API, but that API is secured that you need to authorize or authenticate yourself. So you would send username and password to authenticate from headers, or you would send login cookie so that API understand your request and give the response. Alright, and when you are sending the request, so API should know in what format you are sending the request. You could send it in JSON, XML or text HTML. You have to tell to API that what kind of format your request is being sent. So that details we will give in header, like content type is JSON. So these are like additional details we will send to our API, right? So now you might have questions where I should send this headers, how I can construct query parameters, where I should pass. All these details now we will start looking in our next lecture. I will introduce a new tool called Postman tool. So this course completely teaches you API testing in both manual and with automated. So for automated we use REST assured. But before we start automation, first of all you should understand how to test an API manually. Thereafter you can replicate into an automation code with the way of how you have designed. Okay, if I directly jump to automation you won't understand. I have designed some bunch of APIs for you guys to practice. We will go through all of them, and first we will test it through Postman. So for manual testing, the commonly used tool across the world is Postman. So I will show what is Postman and how to do testing using that, and we will take it from there. Alright, see you in the next lecture. Thank you. Welcome back. Right, so let me download Postman tool in this lecture. So before I show the API what we're gonna test, first of all let's download this tool. So you can just directly go to their official website postman.com, and here you would just have this download the app button where you can simply download that tool into your machine. Okay, so based upon the OS you have, you can download that respective version. So right now I'm in Windows 64-bit, so I'm selecting that. It's simple. It downloads in .exe file. Just double click on it and it will open the app like this. So this is how you will see when you first open Postman. You won't see any projects on the left side because these are the projects I have used in my earlier trainings. Okay, so we will freshly create new project here and start testing. Let me show you the API what I want to use in upcoming few videos to test and understand the API basics. So you can download that API from this website rahulshettyacademy.com. So navigate to practice projects tab, and here you will see an API contract, Google Maps. So I have created these APIs exclusively to practice for the people who have enrolled in this course. Okay, so this is the replica of Google Map APIs. So I have gone through the Google Map APIs and how they work. So based upon that, I created few APIs which exactly looks like Google Maps, and I hosted it on my server so that you can practice them freely without any cost. So this is the one. You can download this complete document from here. There are 4 APIs I have designed. Add API. So this API will add new place into server. I hope you all know about Google Maps and how it works. So if you want to add a new place, let's say you bought a shop and you started a new business basically, and you want to add that place into server. So Google Maps have provided one API where you can fill all the details and you need to just submit to that API, and that API will automatically create place for you in the backend. Similarly, there is another API called delete API. So if you want to delete any place from the Google Maps which you have created earlier, then you can use this delete API to delete the place from their Maps server. Now, if you want to retrieve any place, now you can open the app and you will just search with some city name and you will get all the details, all restaurants around that, right? So that's all happening with the help of get place API. Okay, all is happening behind the screens. You will just give the details, but you don't know what happens, right? It's all about get place API, which pulls up all the details and it will show up for you. Okay, so there is one API which we need to test that as well. And finally, there is one more API called put place. So if you want to update the place with the new details, let's say you have already placed in the Google server and you want to update it with new details, then you will use put place API. So if you remember, in my introduction section, I clearly told that there are 4 types of HTTP methods are there to interact with API: post, get, delete, and put. So I have made sure that I cover all the scenarios with this API example. Okay, so we will not only discuss this single API. By end of this course, I think we have discussed around 4 to 5 different complete API projects. So this is one of the project out of it. Okay, more importantly, when you are in a project and if you are expected to do some API testing, the first question what you need to ask is to get API contract. So if someone asks you to start testing APIs, you just can't do it directly. Okay, you need to know all the contract of that API. So contract in the sense, you need to know what is the base URL, what is the resource, query parameters, HTTP method, what is the JSON body, how does it look like, and what is the response you are expecting. All the details should be given to you. Okay, so based upon these details, you will test the API and validate if that API is behaving as per expected criteria or not. Okay, your developer should share all these details with you when they expect you to do some API testing. If it is just web browser testing, you just need a web browser, right? Okay, so if you want to test rahulshettyacademy.com, they can simply tell the URL name and you can start testing this app. But whereas in API, to test you need a lot of things. So we generally call that as an API contract. Okay, so you should ask them first, give me the API contract so that I will start API testing. Yes, they have given, and this is our API contract. Now let's begin manual testing using Postman tool. So let me open Postman. So first of all, to create a new project, in Postman terms we would say a new collection, right? So collection name, so this is our own API, right, which is hosted on Rahul Shetty Academy. So I would say RSA stands for our academy, and then maps. So this is our collection name. You can give the description what all it does if you need, and then create. So this is like a folder name, that's it. Under this folder, now let us start with add place API. You can say add request. So now we are actually adding a request to send to the API. What is that request name? I would say it as add place, and save it to RSA maps. So that request now will be stored under this project. Awesome. Now double click on this request And here you go. These are the details what Postman is showing us. Now we have to fill all the details and we need to click on this send button so that your request is being submitted to the API with the details what you provide. First things first, base URL. So this is our base URL. So let's go to the Postman and provide here if you see enter request URL. So we need to give the complete endpoint here. So I clearly told in the previous lecture that endpoint will be constructed with base URL / resource. Remember, / any parameters. That's the whole syntax of the endpoint. So after constructing the complete URL, we would call that as an endpoint. But this is the base URL where our server is located, right? / You should get these details again. Do remember that someone has to provide all these details. So there is clear information that we need to target this resource. Maps API place add JSON. That resource should be concatenated with base URL. Make sure there is only a single /. Good. What next? Query parameters. So if you see the standard syntax, base URL which we have given resource / query parameters needs to be sent. Okay, you can take this as an example. Okay, just search in New York in the URL and you will know how to construct this endpoint. With the contract what we have, we don't have any path parameters. We just only have query parameters. And they clearly given that key is the query parameter name and this is the value. So you need to send this as a query parameter to access this add API. Awesome. Right. And if you remember, I clearly told that for query parameters, you should provide and start with question mark. Then only it recognizes that as a query parameter. Okay. Instead, if you see here, params, there are different tabs present in Postman. So you can come to this tab and here it clearly told as a query parameter. Even if you give here, that's fine. It still will be concatenated. Let me show you. So key is our parameter and QA click 1 2 3 is the value. So this is our query parameter, key value. And you see that when you start providing here, automatically here it got concatenated. Okay, so either you can provide it here or you can, if there are more than 5 to 6 query parameters, you can list down all here step by step so that automatically it will construct on top. So this is your complete request endpoint. And next, HTTP method. So what kind of method it is? So in our introductory lectures, we thought that get is to retrieve details and post is to submit something on the server. So we are adding a place in an API. So that means we are submitting some new details into the server. So that's why developer have designed this API and given HTTP method as post. Okay. Again, you don't decide this. They should tell you what is that API nature. Okay, so you cannot predict. If they designed it as another HTTP method, then obviously you will run into issues. So that's why contract is more important. So HTTP method is post, so you can set that here. Right now by default, when you create a new request in Postman, that will be defaulted to get. So change the drop down to post. Awesome. So these are the details we have given till now. And what else? And if you remember that for post request, we have to send JSON body. Okay, so this is the sample body you need to send. Now we are clearly telling that go and add a place, but what place to add, and you need to give a lot of details, right? To add a place, Google will ask you a lot of questions. So what is the location, latitude, longitude, accuracy, name, phone number? So if you give all these details, then only it will create a place. So as it is the post HTTP method, all these details should be sent securely in the body. If it is a get request, you can send all the details in the URL itself, either in form of query parameters or in form of path parameters. You can ask everything in that URL, endpoint URL only. Just because it is a post, the details should be securely sent. So you need to know what is that format of that JSON as well. Again, these details also you should get from the person who developed this. So let me copy this JSON body. Let's assume that this is what we got from them, and you can change the details. So this is the like schema, syntax. You can have your own name, own phone number, address, everything, but format is this. All right. So there is a component called body here. If you see, you need to select it, and our body format is JSON. 99% times when you are dealing with REST APIs, the body will be JSON only. Now select raw as a radio button, and then from the drop down select JSON. Paste that entire JSON here. Alright. So you can change any name. So right now so this is my new organization which I established, and this is my phone number, everything. Okay. And the category you can write as an education. So let it be what you have right now here. And website, you can give the website name. One more thing, that it's better that you can also have a header. So as you selected JSON as your input, automatically in headers you see that content type is application/JSON. This header is automatically added, because when you are sending the request, we were sending the body in JSON request, right? As you selected the JSON, in headers also Postman automatically set content type. So content type is a header used to say what format you are using. This is a standard header. Awesome. So all the details we have successfully given as per the contract shared with us. Okay. And this is the complete URL. You see that I have written here. Just make sure if everything is as expected. So now you can submit this request to an API so that it reaches the server and goes to this maps resource, and from this is the resource, and from there it will read this request and give you the response back. Okay. So as per documentation contract, the response should be something like this. If it's success, then the response fields should be like status okay, and you will get one unique place ID to recognize that place, and if you want to use that place in the future again, you can use this ID to retrieve. Okay. And there is one more ID component as well, and the reference and the scope. These are some different values what it gives you back. All right. So let's submit this request. Awesome. Perfect. You got the response. You see that when you scroll down, this is the response section and this is the request section. So you have submitted the details and you got a response that okay. So that means your place is now added into the Google Maps server. But again, this is dummy. Okay. So that's added in rahulshettyacademy.com server. We are not dealing with the real APIs. You have to pay to deal with real APIs, but there also exactly same thing will be used. Okay. I just created a new APIs which looks like theirs. Okay. So you can verify that if the response what you get is as per expected contract, and the status 200. When the status says 200, that means it stands for successful HTTP response what you got. Okay. So this is how you can test API and see if it is giving the expected response. So we have successfully tested one API by going through the contract. Okay. In our next lecture, we will use getPlace API. We should be able to retrieve the details what we added using the getPlace API. Okay. We'll talk about this in our next lecture. Thank you. Alright. So let me show another API now. So we are done with add. Before we see delete, I will talk about getPlace API. So this API will get existing place details from the server. Okay. So basically when you create a place, you will get one place ID. Okay. That is the unique for the place what you added. So in the future, if you want to refer to this place, you can ask Google Maps with this ID so that can retrieve for us. Right. Now, the contract for get API is, this is the base URL which is obvious because it's hosted on our server. This time resource is different. If you observe for add place, it is API/place/add, and here it is get. So that means resource is different. So that it will reroute to different API call this time when you provide this resource. Okay. And parameters. And this is interesting. So if you see here, this contract says that get API is expecting two parameters as an input. One is a key. Okay, key is always hard coded and it is QA click 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is like accessing your API securely. So in real time you will have your own key with your corporate account, but here it's a hard coded. So that doesn't mean that every API should have this parameter. I just created this to say that we are using one parameter to call the API. Okay. Now next parameter is the tricky one, place ID. Okay, so when you ask Google to get that place details, you just need to provide place ID, because that API should understand what place details I have to send. It can give you only when you pass the ID. Okay, based upon that ID, it will search in their database and it will give you the all the details what the person initially added into the server. Okay, and that's what we need to do. And here HTTP request method is used as a get, because we are not submitting anything to server, we are just retrieving the details. Okay, I hope you got this information in our introductory lectures. So as we are just retrieving from database, we are using get request. And when you use get, there will not be any body. Okay, body will come into picture only if it is not get. Okay, if it is a get, all the details what your API needs, everything we will send as part of the URL only. Okay, so here these are query parameters. Okay, so obviously we need to send all the details in the URL and it's a get. So obviously there is no body, and when you hit, you would get a response back with all the details of that place, just like what you have added initially, like latitude, longitude, name, everything you will get back, right? So for add API, these are the details we sent, right? Now we using get API, in the response you should again expect same details. Okay, so that's what contract says, and for that you need to provide this place ID. Awesome, let's do that now. So let me create another request, add request, and then so when you are working in your real-time projects, you will see their company URL where that servers are hosted, and the resource name which will identify that API uniquely. And now we were asking about query parameters. Sorry, why I am giving here? Let me wait. This is like just get place. I'm more excited to teach this get place, so I'm giving before. Okay, so here, right, and query parameters you can either give here or there is a separate tab. Let's give it here. Key will be QA click 1, 2, 3. When you see that when you are typing here, automatically it gets concatenated. And next is place ID is what this get is expecting, right? So that place ID, let's say you want to retrieve the details which you just added in the last lecture. Okay, so this is the place ID you got in the response. So grab this place ID and place it here. Perfect. And this is get HTTP call, so you would use that. And what else we need to give? I think that's all, because this is just a get and there is no body. And let's hit this request and see what happens. Sending. Great. You see that you got a response back with the details what you just added here in the add place. So the same JSON here is replicated. Okay, but there is a little different with the syntax, but obviously that's how the API is designed. But you see that all the details, that our website is rahulshettyacademy.com and the guy name is Rahul Shetty Academy, and everything is pre-populated. So this is how you can retrieve the details using get place API. So key point here is to pass the place ID, and this ID will get when you create add place for the first time in the response. Okay, good. So when you are asked to do manual testing, you will first add the place, capture the ID, and you will use the get place API. And when you get a response, you will make sure you validate the response what you have is what you initially sent in add place. Okay, so this is how basically you compare, and more importantly you would see the status. Okay, in the response, if you see status as okay and the number is 200, that means it's a success. Okay, nice. So this is a get place, and I will quickly show delete place. Add request and delete place, save to RSA maps, and let me go through a contract. As I said, contract is the heart for your API testing. If you don't have these details, how would you know what to test? Okay, there is a put here, but first let's start with the delete. Yeah, so this API will delete the existing place. So we have added this place, right? Let's try to delete that. Okay, I'll delete this place using this API, and again I will try to call with get place API. Then obviously you should not get the response because you just deleted it. And after you delete, if you ask to get it again, you should get some response saying that place not found. Okay, that's again testing. So let's test this. So contract, base URL, resource. And the resource this time is the delete. Perfect. And query parameters, key. Right. Next, this complete request is on post. Obviously, because you are now deleting place. So that means you are submitting something into the server. You are not just retrieving it. You are making modifications, either adding or deleting. When you update something inside, it is always suggested to go with post or delete. Okay, so both will be used. Let me write it delete because I recently modified this API to delete. But do remember that when you update or modify something, post is a superset. Okay, you can use post for any alter operations on your server. You can still write delete because delete is exclusively talks about deleting something, but that doesn't mean that post cannot be used here. It's all depends upon your developer and team how would that API needs to be written. Okay, earlier I have this as a post, but just for explanation purpose I recently modified that to delete. Okay, so again you will get that from contract. Don't worry, you need not assume anything. If you don't see that in contract, just ask the team that what is the HTTP request type for this API. That's it, they'll tell you. Alright, so body, as I told, anything apart from get should go as part of body. Okay, for get you can send it in the URL. You know that we were sending the body in the JSON, so whenever you select this, automatically header also will be added, right? And this is how you need to send your request. Select the body. Now which place you want to delete? Let's say that I want to delete the place which I just added. Where is that add place, right? Yeah, this is the place ID for what we added. Now I am giving the same place ID here, so that when I submit this request, it has to reach delete APIs, and then it has to pick this place ID and it should get delete from the database. Okay, let's see. Awesome. The response what you got is status okay. That is what we need here. Okay, so that means that place is deleted. The one what you added in the last lecture now should not exist in rahulshettyacademy.com server. Okay, now I will go to get place, and if I hit this API again, okay, just before we saw how we got the response, right? Now when I try again, let's see what happens. It should fail. You see that get operation failed. Looks like place ID does not exist because we just deleted it. Good. So this way you tested how to add a place, if it is working or not, and get the place, and also deleting the place. Alright. In the next lecture I will show about put place API. With that we can wrap this manual discussion, and I will quickly switch back to automation gear and show how to automate all these API testing validations. Okay. Thank you. Welcome back. So let me quickly show how updating place works using put place API. I will create one more new request and I would say update place. Right. So by now you are familiar with how to create the complete URL, right? So this is the contract for put place API. So let me very quick write all the details. Update place. And this is the resource name, place/update/JSON. You see that resource name is different for each and every API here. Okay, so query parameters, it says as a key is QA click 123, and then this is an HTTP method put. Okay, so I explained you in the introductory lectures that we use HTTP method put when you want to update something. Okay, when you want to add, you will go with post. But you can still use post here. As I told you in the last lecture, post is a superset. You can use either post or put. But in general, documented wise, people ask you to, it's the best practice to use put. But I know so many companies which they rely on post on common for all these altering on database. Okay, they will only rely on two API methods, get or post. For practice purpose, I am showing you all different HTTP methods so that whatever you have in your company, you can work on it with the practice what you did here. So put is a HTTP method to handle this API as per contract what we have designed. Now, so this API can update address. Okay, so we have designed in such a way that it can update only the address field. So updating all the fields became little bit complex while writing the code. So I have taken a sample of updating the address. So whatever the address you have currently, if you want to update that address, then you can use this put place API and then you can just update that. Let's see. So now I will go and add a new place because I just deleted in our previous lecture for demonstration of delete place. Okay, so the place is successfully added and this is the place ID. Now this is the existing address. So we have moved our organization to new address. So obviously I have to update it, right? So that is why we are using update place API. Now, so as I said, any API HTTP method apart from get will have the payload which you need to send as part of body. You cannot write that in the URL. Okay, so for that reason, select the body tab and pick the JSON as your format. Right. So here you have to provide the place ID for which you want to update the address. So right now I just added a new place, right? For this place, I want to update with new address field. Okay. Nice. Next, you have to give the what is the new address. Earlier the address was 29 side layout Cohen and this time new address was 70 Summer Walk USA. I want to update with this new address and at the same time make sure you pass the key is QA click 123. So you might be wondered, why should I pass this here? Just follow blindly what your contract says. That's it. So my developer, when I asked him to create, I did not ask him to have this in the request body, but he did it. Then I said, okay, let it be. So that's the contract. You should follow the rules and regulations. Okay, so this is the constant and this is the place ID for which you want to update and the new address. Now let's submit this. I think we have given all the details. We have passed the query parameters and resource name, and this is what contract says, and the put HTTP method is what we are using here. Great. So the message what we got is address successfully updated. Now how to validate if we have successfully updated or not? We have a get place API, right? We can use this place ID and see what is the address it is returning back to us. Okay. So update the place ID in your get request and submit. This time it should give the complete place details and there you should see 70 Summer Walk which you just added, and the one what you added initially is now no more present. Okay, so that's what this update place API does. Great. So this is how add, get, delete, update, all the CRUD operations we have successfully discussed with different type of HTTP methods. Okay. Now this is how you test manually through Postman tool. In the next lecture, let's bring automation into picture and we'll see how to create end-to-end automation flow to happen all this through the REST assured Java code. But as per interview perspective, the topics what you have learned till now are crucial because not everyone might be expert in automating the APIs, but they might ask you theoretical questions to understand and check your knowledge on API, right? Thank you.